Hey guys, Richard Miller here from Miller Type Foundry, and today in this video I'm going to show you how to choose a font. Now basically I'm going to go over some quick tips on when selecting a font, how you pick the right font for the specific task that you're doing. So without any further ado, we'll get into the video. There's 4 basic principles that I feel like you should consider when choosing a font for a specific job. And that is the style of what you're trying to accomplish. Is the font legible at the size that you're using it or the application that you're using it for? You want to talk about the hierarchy, and that basically just means which fonts are placing the emphasis on your design and which fonts are maybe blending into the background of your design. And lastly, contrast, pairing different fonts together or different styles within the same font family. So those are the 4 things that we'll cover here in this video. So I'll just copy this here and we'll move into some examples. So basically, here's a font that I designed a few years ago. And this font is called Uniform Rounded, and it's got a few different weights. There's a wide version, and there's an extra condensed version. There's a condensed version as well. But basically, this is a logo I designed, and for this place called Fun Learning for Kids. And this logo, is for kids, so you want it to look a certain style. So the first thing we consider when designing this logo is, does the font fit the style? Now I think this font fits the style very well. I think it's perfect for it because it's got the rounded shapes, it looks kind of kid friendly. So I think that works great. Now if we were to just get a different font that's a completely different style, look at this font that's more of like, looks kind of like a gothic style. This doesn't fit at all. This doesn't look kid friendly. This doesn't look kiddie at all. This font called Tortello. Let's go back to that. The style, like I said, the style fits the genre. This is a logo for kids. Now legibility, is this legible? Yeah, this is legible. You can read everything that it's saying. You don't want the letters too close together so that you can't read it. If this was, maybe we use a lightweight, that might make it kind of hard to read because, with this thick outline, this is kind of hard to read in contrast to those. So yeah, it's legible. Now, the hierarchy of the fonts, what's being emphasized in your design. So based on the hierarchy of these different fonts, this word kids is being emphasized because it's the biggest. That's because it's the extra condensed width of this font. Now, if I were to go to the font and instead of doing the extra condensed version, I just did the regular version, obviously I'd have to shrink it down to get it to fit in here. And now it's not as emphasized as much. Now learning seems to be the biggest emphasis. Kids and fun are similar. When I use the condensed weight, it makes the letters taller and therefore bigger and puts more emphasis on the kids. This is fun learning for kids. And then lastly, contrast. You don't want sometimes when every single word is just the exact same font, it just gets boring. This just isn't exciting because every single font is the same. And especially if they're all the same size, then it'd be even more boring, which is more dynamic. This one, where the sizes are different, the shapes are different, or this one where everything's the same. Obviously this one looks way better. It's more dynamic. It's got some contrast in there. It's not just every bit of text is the same font. Let's look at some more examples. So this is something I just mocked up real quick for this video. And this is like a business card for like a lawyer or something. So, this is the same font, Uniform Rounded, condensed, that I used up here for this kids logo design. But, for an attorney, it doesn't work. The style doesn't match. It's too kiddie. When you're a lawyer, you want something serious. Find some serious fonts. Here's a font that I designed called Intervogue. It's a very serious font and very simplified. For this application, it's okay. But I think, something better would be to use a serif font. I think that looks a lot more, I think the style for that fits this design better, to use a serif font like that. Now legibility, legibility is fine here. This right here gets kind of hard to read, so maybe we'll give it a little bit of space just to make it a little bit more legible. And hierarchy, now these are the same. This definitely needs some hierarchy going on because Bill Johnson and Attorney at Law, it's the same exact font, same size, same everything. So, hierarchy basically is where you want to guide the viewer's eye and put emphasis on the right areas. So we want Bill Johnson to be the biggest part. Let's make Attorney at Law smaller. Let's drop this down to like maybe 21 point, and maybe we can make it all caps. So we'll make it even smaller. 18 point. Let's add a bunch of tracking in there. So that's a little bit better. We can play around with that, but at least now the emphasis is on Bill Johnson and Attorney at Law has less emphasis on it. There again here, maybe we want to make this a little bit bigger. Then the rest of the letters, maybe we want to add like a line in here. Yeah, so now you've got some hierarchy here. You've got the name, there again, is much larger than the rest of all this stuff. And then contrast, there again, all of these are the exact same. Maybe let's make this bold, just to differentiate it so we're not using the exact same font for every single item on here. That gets really boring. Maybe we'll make Attorney at Law bold down here. So this is a font that I designed called Intervogue. And basically this was just kind of a mock-up page thing that I made for it to show off what the font could be used for. Talking about the Guggenheim Museum, which is like a fancy art museum in New York. So, the style that fits that is kind of how this font is, where it's straight lines, very clean, very minimal. That's the style that fits an art museum very well. If I was to pick a different font, so for instance, I designed this font called Tactic Sans a number of years ago, and this font is more of like a military theme. So if I were to use that font for this, it just doesn't work. The style just doesn't match. Like I said, if I'm doing something military themed, this font would be perfect. But for a modern art museum, it just doesn't work. It's just too blocky. Even if I were to make it a lighter weight, it just doesn't fit the style. The style doesn't work. So let's go back to Intervogue. And then legibility, is this legible? Yeah, this is legible. Now I had to do some tweaks to make it legible. I had to add a lot of tracking. So if I had no tracking at this text size, see how they're all really condensed a lot? And it makes it a little bit harder to read. If you want to make your text that's very small more legible, always just add a bunch of tracking, and that always helps significantly, helps it be more legible, helps the letters breathe a lot better. When it comes to hierarchy, as you can see, the word Guggenheim here is much larger than the rest of this. If this was all just the exact same, the word Guggenheim wouldn't stand out. If it wasn't even in all caps, then it just blends in with the rest of the text. So if we get rid of the all caps and this title here, talking about the museum, is exactly the same weight and everything as the rest of this text, then it doesn't blend in. But if you make it all caps, you make it bigger, you change the color, now you've got this part emphasized more than just the body text. And of course this G is even bigger, so it's emphasized even more still. And then with the contrast, like I said, this one is the gold color and this is black. If everything's just the same colors, it's boring. You want to add some contrast in there, spice it up to make it more interesting. Now this is a font that I designed a few years ago called Blunt. And I basically designed this to be an alternative to Impact, and it has a specific application, but it's not good for everything. For instance, this is great for large text where, like the name Impact implies, when you want to make an impactful design. But this is not a font for small body copy. If you go back to this design, if we made this blunt, all of a sudden this is extremely hard to read. This messes up our legibility. This is a font that has a specific application, and when it comes to contrast, we've got various different widths in this font. So if I just use, this is the regular width, if I just use the regular width for everything, the design's less dynamic. It's just everything's the same. It's kind of a little bit boring. So that's why here I'm using the condensed italic style for this, and for the energy drink part, I'm using the regular style. Like I said, add some contrast so you're not just using the exact same font for every single element on the page. That gets boring. Take what we've learned here and we'll apply it to a page here. So let's say you're going to create this page of text. We're going to try to make it more interesting. You know, this is just from Wikipedia. It's just some information about typography itself from the Wikipedia page. So let's spice this up a little bit. Because it's talking about typography, let's do something clean. So we'll go with Uniform Pro regular. This is a font that I designed a few years ago. And the reason why I picked Uniform Pro is because it actually has the Greek letters. See here, the Greek letters from the article. That's why I'm using Uniform Pro here. If I used, other fonts like Blunt that I've designed, as you can see, when it gets to the Greek letters, it doesn't have those characters. So we'll go with Uniform Pro there. Legibility. How legible is this? Not very. We need to increase the tracking. Like I said, if you want to make long amounts of body copy more legible, especially if they're small, then adding more tracking is always useful. Not too much. If you add too much tracking, then it becomes too hard to read the other way. But a little bit of tracking, 25, maybe 50, depending on the size and various things, can help. And then we want to increase the leading, the space in between the lines. That always helps with legibility. That helps the text breathe a little bit. So we'll bump that up to 18. It's a lot better already. And then now hierarchy. Now the title, these are some headers. It all blends together here because it's all the exact same font. So let's make this bigger. We'll make this 36. Put a paragraph in here. And these other headers, we'll increase these a little bit. Maybe make them bold. So that's a little bit better there. Maybe I'll make this in all caps. So that adds a little bit more hierarchy. Now it's easier to find what it is that you're looking for on the page. And then contrast, just so we're not using the exact same font or font style for everything. We'll put this into medium italic. And let's make this, instead of Uniform Pro, let's make it Uniform Pro extra condensed. And that way, we'll make it medium. We'll make it a little bit bigger. That way we're using some different fonts. That way you can differentiate this font, the font of the title, from just the plain text, so it's not all the same font, which, like I said, can be very boring. And let's try this in all caps. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. So as you can see here, we've come a long way from where we started. This is the original, and then this is after we made some tweaks, followed these rules here. Like I said, number one, style. Does the font fit what you're trying to design? Legibility, hierarchy. Where's your eye being led? If you want to find the title of the article and the subtitles, this one's very easy. This one's very hard. That all blends in. Contrast. This one, everything's the same font. This one, you've got some variations to make it more interesting. So I hope that some of these tips helped you when you're choosing a font for your next design. And definitely subscribe to this channel if you want to see some more videos on various typography related subjects. If you have any questions about typography or any comments or anything you want me to talk about in a future video, definitely leave a comment below. If you want to pick up any of the fonts that I've showed here, this uniform font or any other fonts that I've talked about, there's links in the description below. I hope you learned something, hope you had fun, and I'll see you in the next video.